My name is Weronika Michalak. I represent Hill Polska, and we are happy to be the partner of Igrzyska Wolności Freedom Games. Let me introduce our guests who will join us in discussion on the environmental issues related to the concept and implementation of the European Green Deal. In alphabetical order, Antoni Bielewicz, the manager of European Climate Foundation Polska, Agata Czachórska, manageress for sustainable development in IKEA Retail Polska, Hakima Haité, president of Liberal International. She will join us online. Do we have her with us? There she is. Hello. And Urszula Zielińska, an MP to the Polish Parliament from the Green Party. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, when holding various discussions and participating in them on climatic issues, environmental problems, I have always repeated that the topics are discussed and that we can talk about it in open public debate on climatic changes. Now I'm changing my narrative because it is not an add-on to the Freedom Games, to big conferences where eco-social issues are discussed. This is a key issue, and the fact that the climate is present, that we talk about it here at the Freedom Games, we talk about European Green Deal, it's a must, because the climate change affects each and every one of us in every country, and we all bear the consequences of it. So we must not separate the topics any longer. Even yesterday, if you followed the opening or meetings, the climate change was often raised as one of the key challenges of our times. We only have 45 minutes for our discussions and we need to stick to the time. I'd love to leave several minutes at the end for questions to our guests, but as a beginning introduction for those of you who are not familiar with the European Green Deal, I wouldn't like to spend much of the discussion on analyzing all the aspects, because we will discuss it, but we will not be able to touch thoroughly on each of those. But for those of you who are not aware, in 2019 the European Commission announced the concept of the European Green Deal, that is a collection of initiatives that is supposed to lead the European Union to reach climate neutrality until 2050. The concept of the program is broad. It is a set of guidelines from various fields, just let me quote a few of those, that altogether should bring us to climate neutrality. 10 priorities: climate neutrality, circular economy, renovation of buildings, zero waste, that is emission into air, water and soil, ecosystem and biodiversity, healthy food, sustainable agriculture, financial resources for regions in need, research and development, and climatic representation outside the EU. Is it an ambitious program? Is it realistic? Well, in the beginning, before we kick off the analysis, I would like to ask Antoni Bielewicz, as the representatives of the organizations dealing with climate, please explain climate neutrality to us, and in the context of the recent R&D reports from Europe on the effects of climate change, how we should treat the program. Should it be a political ambition to implement something, or it is of utmost importance affecting all of us? Thank you very much for the question and the introduction that draws the space for our discussion, which is far broader than the climate, because we speak of innovations, environmental protection, health, pollutions, but we need to admit that the European Green Deal, as one of the key reference points, adopts the climate neutrality until 2050, and that means in 2050 economies and citizens of the EU should emit less greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and others. Remember, there are at least 7 or 8 different substances, volatile substances. Then it can be absorbed by the soil or systems, industrial systems like carbon capture storage, a complex technology that should help us to catch the carbon dioxide production. This is the goal that is most seen in the European Green Deal. It is also most ambitious and demanding, in my opinion, but unquestionably we have no option to turn our backs onto it. In the second decade, in the 21st century, we emitted as much carbon dioxide that the temperature growth compared to the pre-industrial era has already reached above 1 degree Celsius. That's a lot. We speak about the average temperature, so in which the growth is higher because the concrete surfaces and spaces heat up far more. What is worrying and is not much discussed, we see the growth of the ocean temperature, and that is the main substance, the main factor that shapes the climate and provides us with winters or summers, warmer or cooler, and that is the biggest storage of heat and cold. The oceans also have increased the temperature a bit below 1 degree Celsius. By recent research, it's 0.8 Celsius, and this is very worrying phenomenon because that's with such vast amounts of water, such growth of the temperature means we are right before the huge threat to all people on the earth. And I do not like to frighten people, but we have received so many stimuli to consider what we can do for the climate. I cannot imagine any stronger signals. Floodings in the west of Europe, flooding in the south of Poland. The floodings from the mid-August are a serious problem in Poland. Fires in California, that is nothing new, and in fact they are a part of the natural, or perhaps not natural, a phenomenon that is sort of typical for the region, but the scale is growing year to year, so it poses a threat for the richest state in the US. And for the rich part of the society. So this is a signal that makes people think what can be done to reduce the average growth of temperature on the Earth. Well, thank you very much. To supplement your words, in Poland we should notice the heat wave. That's the impact on our health. That's the one that we most painfully suffer. Its consequences, the heat waves are still longer, and the mortality statistics, especially among the elderly, we see the growth occurring together with the heat waves. So numerous factors, increasing temperatures, spreading infectious diseases, problems leading to food production issues. So the list of effects is not just that the climate is warming by 1 or 2 degrees. No, the consequences are far more serious. A question to Hakima Haité. You used to be vice president of COP21 in Paris. That is a climate conference during which negotiations were pending on key regulations or obligations by the states to reduce emissions. You are the person who follows the climate policies. You've been doing that for many years. You've been for many years involved in high positions on climate and in the environment. How, in your opinion, what, in your opinion, are the challenges ahead of us? What we as people, governments, decision makers, countries should do, because the initiative is truly ambitious, to persuade all the people, all the governments, so that they go in one direction, so that they go along the path leading to climate neutrality, which may seem very ambitious or too difficult to achieve, but translating that into practical actions, what could we do? Do we need to change our way of thinking about the contemporary world, or is there any significant social dimensions we should stress?
Now, I would say that I would like first to thank you for inviting me to this year's Freedom Games. I'm glad to be here and to be part of this important discussion. And before answering to your question, I would like first to say that the Green Deal is very ambitious indeed, but not impossible to implement. Yes, it will require us to change everything. If we want to change climate change, we need to change. We need to change the way of manufacturing, the way of building, the way of transporting, the way everything should change. So we are changing the culture of humankind, and we are creating a new civilization. This is what it's about. This is the global transformation called for by the Paris Agreement. It's indeed a multi-dimensional and multi-sectorial, multi-dimensional, and it's transgenerational transformation. So yes, it will require our mobilization, the mobilization of business, the mobilization of territories, of all of us. I will also say that the Green Deal is the first of the genesis of a new model of development. This is what we are doing. We are creating a new civilization, because what we are aiming to is to reach neutrality by 2050. And this is the first time in the history of humanity that we are asking human beings to decouple development from pollution. We used to develop, but we used to pollute. And this is the first time in the history as such effort on decoupling pollution from development is a request. And this so big effort requires that nations, that people, that territories, that all of us, because this is our responsibility, all of us, we deliver and we act now, because as you said it's climate change is threatening on a daily basis humanity. You are feeling it now in Europe, in United States, but in Africa, in small island, people were feeling climate change decades before. So now that the urgency is here, we need to act together. What I think as a climate change activist, I first would like to congratulate the EU for that. Because, as you know, when it comes to climate change, the world is a small village. No country, no continent, even the most powerful one, can tackle climate change on its own. It's our shared responsibility. And by doing so, EU is instigating a new dynamic, not only within Europe, but worldwide. As president of LI, one important change, I will say, brought by the New Deal, it's fairness. And the fact that the Green Deal will reduce the impact or the effect of climate change on the most vulnerable group of the society within Europe. But let's not forget that, as you said, and I said, climate change has no nationality, no borders. What we need to do to lead a general change to achieve the global transformation is challenging. Really, it's challenging. And for a global challenge, we need a global answer. And it's why I see that the leadership of the EU is very important within the climate arena and within the UNFCCC negotiation. So what we need a systemic, multidimensional and transgenerational approach for which we need a vision. And it's why, it's a long-term work, and it's why within the Paris Agreement there is the long-term strategy, and this is what the Green Deal is about, is the vision for 2050. What we need policies to send the right signal to industries, to business, to people. We cannot afford anymore to subsidize fossil fuel and to ask industries to innovate for clean transport or clean cars, etc. So we should send the right signals to business and to citizens, and then industries will invest, will innovate, and we will introduce low carbon technologies, and then citizens will change their choices. If you subsidize fuel and if the cost of the electrical car or clean cars are bigger than the fossil fuel car, nobody will be interested in. So we need to send this right signal through policies and regulation. We need to move both with a world approach, and this is what we are doing within the UNFCCC, but also regional and local approach, and it's why I'm congratulating the EU, because what we are asked to do is to change on a citizen level, and I think that if we adopt a local approach, both bottom and up approach, we can win the challenge of climate change. We are dealing now with the national determinate contribution. And I think that I have heard about this proposal of the African intergovernmental African cities, which was to implement or to adopt local determinate contribution, which is a component of the indices. The indices will be the aggregation of the local determinant contribution, and then with this local determinant contribution, we can foster the change in the smallest territories. And you know that 80% of action of the decisions taken locally are concerning climate and are related to climate, and 80% of the research are existing locally in territories. So the territories and the local determination can play a major role in bringing the agenda of climate change from a world agenda to a citizenship agenda and foster the change beyond the 7 billion of people. So tackling climate change, I will end by saying, is our common responsibility and determine our shared future, and the urgency says that we have to act now. And personally, I really regret that we don't have any leadership, worldwide leadership. We need more than one leader, we need more than one champion to make the things happen worldwide. So we need to be loud, and thank you for organizing this meeting.
Thank you very much for your opinion. Hakima indeed presented thorough explanation that this is a multi-dimensional, multi-level issue, and we need to act at each and every level. We have had a reference to business. Agata, how do you see business that is supposed to fulfill the European Green Deal objectives, operations? What challenges is business facing? Who bears the responsibility? Are we, customers, select more sustainable, more green solutions, and then the business will follow, the industry will follow the changes driven by us? Or is the responsibility on the business part too? Is the shaping of sustainable behavior of customers and proposing solutions to use in everyday life, is it the way the business should pursue? Where is the biggest responsibility? Who should strengthen or focus the change? Well, let me begin with the responsibility. I agree with Hakima. Each and every one of us is responsible. Governments, local authorities are responsible. States, business, consumers, everybody individually is responsible, because each of us and each, let's name them, organizations contribute to the changes of the climate. So, when we think about business, obviously it bears the liability, the responsibility. The bigger the business, the bigger the responsibility, because the bigger climatic footprint it leaves. Well, let me say, with IKEA, we have the vision to create better conditions of living for many people. By the vision itself and our mission, we see that we bear the responsibility, because we cannot build better living conditions for many people by destroying the environment, by ruining the planet, not caring for the communities. That would be simply impossible. We in IKEA have a very ambitious goal. We name it Be Climate Positive until 2030, which means we want to reduce our climatic footprint by more emission than we actually emit within our value chain. That's a huge challenge ahead of us. As Hakima mentioned, the change we need to implement globally is in fact a systemic change. Our approach is alike. We also observe the change and the transformation we have to implement in our system in a systemic perspective. We not only look at the supply chain, we look at the value chain, because being climate positive will require from us addressing things outside our supply chain, going out to the consumers, help, assist the consumer, inspire them to life that is more positive for the climate and more sustainable. I think that challenges for business are countless, similar for the governments and the European Union, and I believe that the key challenge is to detach the business growth from the use of natural resources. It's difficult. It requires a changing of your business model. It means moving to circular economy, and that, I believe, each business involved into circularization of economy is a pioneer, because I think that nobody has reached that in 100% in full. Well, at the end, I need to mention, in respect of business responsibility, that it is not that we just imagine that. We run research in IKEA that is named Climate Action Research, and it tests consumers' approach to the climate change and to our activities as IKEA. And consumers in Poland clearly show that the key barrier they face when changing actions and behaviors for the sake of the climate is insufficient support from the government and from businesses. Well, I do understand. Well, thank you very much for your words. I would like to ask about the rule polluters pay. Could you address it in the context of business? Should that be an obligation of each corporation, company that releases any pollution to the environment to bear the costs? And I'm not only just mean the cost of CO2 emission, but any pollution that is released into the environment. Shouldn't we speak about it louder, that often corporations and companies avoid that responsibility, and later on somebody needs to clean up the mess after them? Well, I have already stated clearly that we in IKEA believe that it is our responsibility, if we want to run a responsible business, socially responsible business and environmentally responsible business, we need to bear the responsibility. We need to act in such a way as to reduce the pollution. Well, I wanted to focus on this responsibility. What does it mean to bear responsibility? Increase the fees, get involved into various activities aiming to reduce or remove the pollution. That was the goal of my question. Well, briefly, I believe that the most effective method is primarily taking actions that will let us to reduce our impact on the planet, on the climate. Because what if we pay if we still continue to pollute? Well, thank you very much. And let me now move to Urszula Zielińska, MP. What is wrong with the politicians? Well, you represent the Green Party, so your perspective is, well, more closer to our issues that we discuss. How does it happen? We have this climate crisis. We feel the effects of climate change in Poland, all of us. The health, the economic costs are enormous. That climate is more and more discussed, luckily, and that is a topic that, next to the pandemic and coronavirus, makes the front pages of papers and magazines. How is it possible that there is no unanimity and one vision among politicians, that there are people who deny the anthropogenic origin of the climate change? And can you see any chance for a Polish Green Deal, and that it can be implemented, that it can exist and operate in Poland? Because when we observe what is happening in politics, we see enormous resistance. Well, there is resistance without a shadow of a doubt. And the best example is, if you have a moment and have a look at the Parliament's website and read yesterday's commission of the Energy and Climate Commission on the recent report by the climate change team and IPCC, a very important report. And then the president of the commission, let me spare his name by mercy, said that Polish forests, Polish green areas absorb more CO2 than we generate. So we have no such a problem. If these are the words of the president of the Commission for Energy and climate, that something is fundamentally wrong with the Polish politics. That means that in Poland, at this very moment, there is no political will to see the problem and to make any changes. Similarly, Poland versus the European policy. We are like that stubborn donkey pulled by the European Union by our ears, and the government's stand could be summed up briefly. Yes, we do support the European climate policy, the neutrality goal by 2050. Well, let the EU achieve that, but we, Poland, have a totally different situation. It's quite unique. We have so much coal that we need special conditions, and that is this twisted narrative that seems to be naive, that seems to be funny sometimes. Well, let me ask, because we have lots of coal, our energy is based on coal burning, and the climate problem in Poland is political because of that. On the other hand, we have the chance for the biggest money for fair transformation. It's not that we are left to our own devices. Poland has this chance for the best money. Yes, that's true. You can see that from examples. Europe has found the Upgrade Modernization Fund up to several billion euros in the 10 years to come. For countries such as Poland, Poland is supposed to get 47% of the multi-billion fund as a solidarity contribution. The wealthier countries contribute to the poorer ones so that they can go through the transformation faster. Poland has been implementing this fund with 2 years delay, and that is a true picture of the reality around us. While how far we need these actions, such frameworks, from the political perspective, from the legislator, you can see that on your own carbon footprint. You will find on the internet various methods to calculate your own carbon footprint. I did it for myself. I calculated how much CO2 I generate per year and looked how I can reduce that. Well, I can myself do much. Introduce LED bulbs, put photovoltaic panels, do not drive my car, use public transport, reduce the temperature at home down to 20 degrees Celsius. These are the steps I can do myself and reduce my own generation of carbon dioxide. But I live in a block of flats that is heated by the Siekierki power plant in Warsaw, and they generate heat from coal. So as long as they do it, I can't reach the goal of 55 or 65. The science says it should be 65% reduction of the global emission by 2030. The EU is striving to that, saying 55, but it's still not ambitious enough to prevent this 1.5 degree of increased temperature. These examples show how much we need the regulation framework, but what I want to highlight is that the actions by our government may seem childish. They somehow result from ignorance and lack of openness to science, to changes, fear of changes. But the geopolitical situation also matters. Poland is a country very close to Russia, we are very much dependent on fossil fuels, while they are also huge business, huge money, with strong lobby, and we also need to understand we are facing this very concreted industry that will not give up the power, the income, due to by changing the energy model worldwide. We have to understand this is our opponent, and that change requires huge political courage, clear vision and strategy. Thank you very much. Don't know what it's all about. We guess what it's all about in respect of what you said about corporations and revenue. I cannot myself accept into my imagination the argument that the politicians are ignorant, they do not have knowledge. How can it be possible they lack knowledge in such elementary issues when 15-year-olds go to streets, heads full of facts, they organize youth climatic strikes, they protest, they scream, while the key decision makers working in environmental team speak against the scientific facts. So I do want to believe this is lack of knowledge. It's easier to cope with, but I think it's lack of political will and purposeful misleading for which they should account for. And we all bear the consequences. So if somebody lies straightforwardly, acts against each of us. So thank you very much. You addressed those solutions in everyday situations. You told us about yourself, what can be implemented. Mr. Bielewicz, I would like to ask you still, because we are short of time and I need some questions from the audience. Well, European Climate Foundation gets a visitor and the person asks, what should I do to live on my personal level according to the European Green Deal, or not to contribute to increased emission of greenhouse gases? What solutions would you recommend for me as of today? Well, that's a very interesting question. There may be several solutions. The easiest way is to enter ziemianaozdrożu.pl, and there is a calculator there. You can easily get some actions from there. If I think it a bit longer and I adapt it to my family situation, a father with 2 kids, I would first consider where we go on holiday. Do we need to fly a plane to distant countries because this is sort of a fashion? Or I would consider all these methods, how we care about our children. They cannot go by bus to school. They can't go by bus for a trip. Bicycle? Public transport? No. I do travel with my kids by train. That's a great adventure. Obviously, I cannot get everywhere. Our railway network is not okay here in Poland. Then there is diet. Consider how much food do you need, meat do you need to consume? Do we watch when we buy vegetables and fruit? Do we see where they come from? I recently had to fix my shoes, so I decided to buy some glue. I look at the label, Uruguay. Is it Uruguay famous for such products? Well, as we see, such products can travel worldwide. Do they need to? So these are 3-4 basics. Do we have any questions from the audience? Well, I can see. Could we ask for the microphone, please? Thank you. Hello, Daniel Walczak, my name is. I was late, sorry. I don't know if you've already discussed it. Unfortunately, the public transport here in this city is not satisfactory, though it's not an explanation. So sorry for my question. But it's my impression that this responsibility regards huge corporations And then we have what we can do, those usual users, daily waste generators. But let's have a look at the report you've mentioned by the UN independent experts. They say there is no time. We need to act immediately. So, the Polish law may be insufficient. We are members of the EU and there is common flow of goods and labor force. Shouldn't we follow and implement the solutions on the EU level, where we have the situation that manufacturing new plastics is more beneficial than recycled one? Shouldn't we tax it so that making new plastic is not economical, while making from recycled plastic is okay? Shouldn't we standardize glass packaging, bottles, jars, that they are recycled, they are returned to glass mills, but they don't want to buy it because of bad quality? Shouldn't we standardize that on the European level in respect of shape, capacity and color, so that they can be reused, returned to the stores? And then the responsibility would be on the manufacturer's side, and the marketing company and the users. So that's mainly circular economy question in the context of this glass packaging example. Anybody who'd like to respond, address the issue? I can only say yes, yes and yes. That is needed indeed. These solutions are starting to be seen in Fit for 55 package. That's not enough. Well, I'm not talking about Poland, because the law on the extended producer's responsibility is still being worked on. It was supposed to be discussed in June. Now we can expect it September, October, perhaps, but we still have not yet implemented the directive on the disposable packaging. So, yes, absolutely. We agree, and the EU is setting the direction, but still these are very slow solutions, unfortunately. Also, throughout the EU, there are countries that slow down the direction, the pace, but we still need to keep the pressure, push. And the reports you mentioned that are still more precise and more painful, IPCC published every couple of years, they help and show how important and urgent it is. So if the EU is going good way, but still too slow, also because countries like Poland. Antoni Bielewicz? Well, I would like to address action as such. The question is very good. It's mainly about the mechanism of forming public policies on the European and national levels, but my thought is that it's sad. We hear a lot about the climate change threats, pollutions, and that creates resistance in us. We turn to be pessimistic, or we are turning stupid optimist. At the end of the day, we should be activists. We should get involved into actions to fix the buying back used glass bottles. That's the 22nd century issue. Like the youth, perhaps in the street we should join them, or perhaps our school should provide decent, fair knowledge that would group all the information from various areas on the climate change. Thank you very much. We are coming to the end, but I still would like to ask a word of summary from our online guests. So, would you please sum up?
Of the audience, I will say that circular economy is really a huge part of the program we should implement to reach the carbon neutrality. It's also a huge reservoir of jobs and employment. The only thing is that it's not only a citizen action or a business will. This should be managed, and the framework should be developed by the government. The policy, the regulation, you need on a chain value basis, you need to secure the raw material to be able to have the material to build industries, to manufacture the plastic from waste, etc., etc. So I think that in Europe you have a very, very good examples in Germany, and Germany has created 4 million jobs from circular economy and decrease the waste, etc. And you can do that on a chain value basis for any materials. To conclude, there is something we didn't talk about, is the tax, the carbon tax. And you know that in Glasgow we will have to deliver on Article 6, which is the article which defines the mechanism for carbon taxation. And I think that carbon taxation is crucial if we want to move toward the global transformation called for by the Paris Agreement. Because, as you know, when government puts a price on carbon, it sends a signal through the economy. Then business responds by becoming more energy efficient. They are producing clean technologies, etc., giving alternatives to citizens. And then the citizen change his habit and have in the market what he needs to participate in being buying new technologies and low carbon technologies. To make it happen, also we need that the current allocation of investment should be managed in a way to reach the objectives of the carbon neutrality. We cannot, as I told you, continue saying that we want carbon neutrality, but on the other side spend money and spend our fund on everything which is not allowing us to reach this carbon neutrality. So we need more coherency in the international framework. And I can understand the situation in Poland, maybe in some other countries, because we don't have the same interest and we don't have the same challenges. And don't forget that the agenda of a politician is a short-term agenda. It's not a long-term agenda.
Thank you very much, Hakima. We need to finish. I'm so sorry, I wouldn't like to interrupt you, but we get news that our broadcast is coming to the end. We've run out of time. Thank you very much for the participation. Hakima Haité, Agata Czachórska, Antoni Bielewicz, Urszula Zielińska. Thank you very much for this panel, for being here with us. Goodbye.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it. And how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise. Now reporting for flight 1215.
You may now kiss the bride.
Work is different now. We're commuting less, virtually meeting more. Separating work life and life can feel challenging. It's easy to forget that to thrive at work, we need to take care of ourselves. Microsoft Viva Insights offers new experiences to balance productivity and well-being. Personal insights help you stay at your best and most productive. Add structure to your remote workday by opting for a virtual commute, carving out time to have a productive start in the morning and mindfully disconnect in the evening. Protect time before your calendar fills up for focused work, coaching, and learning. Take regular mental breaks with Headspace, tapping into dedicated moments of mindfulness. Use emotional check-ins to tune into your day-to-day mindset and well-being. Strengthen team bonds with Stay Connected experiences that prompt you to praise collaborators, schedule one-on-ones, and follow up on pending commitments and outstanding tasks. Insights for managers and leaders offer windows into how work happens and the impact on employee well-being. Identify where teams may be isolated and take action to break down silos. Quickly discover opportunities to prevent burnout, promote coaching and development, and boost engagement. You and your team's well-being is important, especially in times of change. Taking care of one another allows you to thrive and your organization to build resilience. Experience how new well-being insights in Viva can help.
Liberté Talks. To, co ważne. Seria Liberté Talks realizowana jest dzięki wsparciu Google oraz Państwa darowizną. Na podcast zaprasza Jakub Wiech.
Raz, dwa, trzy, raz, jeden, hej, 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 hej. 1, 2, 3, raz, 2.